Right, disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, you guys, this is from Rita Swan, Child Advocate. And this I'm going to give you guys a trigger alert. There's some really heavy stuff in this one, but I just want to honor these children. Again, trigger warning. It's about children that were permanently taken out because of medical neglect. Victims of religion-based medical neglect. We would like to share with you just a very few of the stories of children who have died because of religion-based medical neglect. They are the tip of the iceberg, as many of these faith deaths are never discovered. That's a fact. Bear in mind, too, that many children who have escaped death have ended up disabled or psychologically harmed as a result of this sort of neglect, or in prison. In our view, these children's parents are neither bad people nor morally innocent. We feel their tragically wrong behavior is motivated mainly by an allegiance to a rigid belief system. The ensuing peer pressure from the faith's other adherents, it's the hive mind, a mistrusting fear of medical science, and a willful ignorance of the human body. Sometimes parents wake up in time to save a child, but too often they do not. Or delayed by confusion and indecision, they wake up too late. Religious exemption laws add to the confusion because they are used by certain churches as evidence that the state endorses the withholding of medical care on religious grounds. The parents may not comprehend the risk they are taking with the child's life when they believe that the state endorses their action. It's also a loophole for liability. The Christian Science Church even uses the religious exemption laws as evidence that legislators agree with them that Christian Science can heal all diseases as effectively as medical care. We believe that these cases show the need to remove religious exemptions from child health care requirements. Surely they illustrate the fact that the state cannot always protect children with court orders. People have many inhibitions about reporting child abuse. That's a whole long road right there. Furthermore, many sick children in faith-healing sects are seen only by fellow church members. Ian Lundman, age 11, died of diabetes in 1989 in suburban Minneapolis. His father had left Christian Science but did not have custody. The boy lost weight and became lethargic. A school official noticed a fruity odor on Ian's breath, a classic diabetes symptom, but did not recognize it as such, nor did she know his mother and stepfather had religious beliefs against medical care. They retained a Christian Science practitioner, who's not a doctor, by the way, for spiritual treatment of Ian's illness. The practitioner billed them $446 for his prayers over 2 days. An unlicensed Christian Science nurse sat by Ian's bedside for the last 5 hours of his life as he lay in a diabetic coma. She knew that he did not respond to anyone. She observed his vomiting, labored breathing, excessive urination, facial spasms, and clenched teeth. Nevertheless, her concept of care was to give him drops of water through a straw and to tie a sandwich bag and washcloth around his private parts. She did not call for medical help or ask his mother to obtain it. Ian's father filed a wrongful death suit against the mother, stepfather, Christian Science practitioner, and nurse. The Christian Science Church and other church agents, a jury awarded him $5 million in compensatory damages and $9 million in punitive damages. The award was later reduced. See this? What is this about? I mean, I know what it is, but the award was later reduced to $1.5 million. An appellate court dismissed charges against the church, so Ian's life wasn't worth much, was it? But held that the practitioner and nurse had a duty to obtain medical care for the child. The Minnesota and U.S. Supreme Courts refused to review the ruling. You guys know who's at the very top of the pyramid, right? McCown versus Lundman, 516 U.S. 1099, cert denied, 1996, is the first suit in the wrongful death of a Christian Science child to be presented to a jury, the higher court ruling that Christian Science providers have a duty to obtain medical care for a sick child may make them less reckless in court in children's cases. However, Christian Science church officials trivialize the ruling. Doesn't that sound familiar? Saying it is relevant only to Minnesota. We still continue to practice our religion as we have been for 100 years. I wonder how many children had died because of it. Said the church's public relations manager, the New York Times, January 23, 1996, page 1. Christian Science nurse Keena Lamb, Gibbelhaus, who cared for Ian, testified that Christian Science is an excellent method of treating juvenile onset diabetes, and that Christian Science nurses are well trained to care for patients sick with all diseases. She was asked at trial what training she had received specific to the care of sick children. Her only answer was that she had been taught to cut sandwiches in interesting shapes. Giebelhaus has a testimony about how she healed herself with Christian Science in the January 26, 1998 Christian Science Sentinel. Neil. 16-year-old son Neil Beagley became very ill shortly after the death of his little niece Ava in March 2008. His parents, Jeff and Marcy Beagley, were members of the Followers of Christ congregation in Oregon, who eschew medical care in favor of communal prayer, the laying on of hands and anointing with olive oil. Neil's aunt reported to the Department of Human Services that Neil's throat was closed up. It sounds like an allergy. He was having trouble breathing and she was afraid he might die. Marcy later testified that she too was afraid. Neil would die, but did not express that fear to the DHS worker who visited the home. Instead, both parents asserted that Neil only had a cold or perhaps case of the flu. Thus misled during his 10-minute visit and unable to determine anything more serious himself, the DHS worker took no further action. 3 months later, Neil died of complications from a bladder outlet obstruction that he had probably had all his life. Oh, poor baby. On autopsy, urine was sloshed throughout his abdomen. Oh. And even in his lungs. His kidneys were working at 4% of capacity, and his heart had swollen to twice the normal size, trying to cope with the damage. He suffered. A feeding journal kept by his mother recorded that Neil was eating only tiny amounts of food, sometimes just a spoonful, for 8 days, and was even being fed baby food. For the full story of this and the followers of Christ's deaths, see Child Newsletter 2010. Matthew Swan, age 16 months, died of spinal meningitis in 1977 in Detroit, Michigan. His parents, Doug and Rita Swan, both lifelong Christian Scientists, retained Christian Science practitioners for spiritual treatments. The practitioners repeatedly said they were healing Matthew. Symptoms were reinterpreted as evidence of healing. For example, one practitioner who observed the baby's convulsions said he might be gritting his teeth because he was planning some great achievement. The practitioners demanded more faith and gratitude from the Swans. They complained that the Swans' fears and other sins were obstructing their treatment. After nearly 2 weeks of serious illness, a practitioner said Matthew might have a broken bone and that Christian Scientists are allowed to go to doctors for setting of broken bones. The Swans took Matthew to a hospital where the disease was diagnosed as Haemophilus influenza meningitis. He lived for a week in intensive care. The Christian Science practitioners would not pray for him while he had medical care. The Swans left the Christian Science church shortly after their son's death and later found child. The Christian Science church continues to misinform its members and endanger their children by claiming it can heal spinal meningitis. Child believes its healings are a viral meningitis, which may well be symptomless and in any event usually causes no permanent injury and are without treatment. By contrast, the bacterial form of meningitis, which killed Matthew Swan, is nearly 100% fatal without antibiotic treatment and 95% curable with antibiotics. Today, it is also vaccine preventable. I'm not a real believer in a lot of things out there, but I think in these severe situations, the children should have gotten some help. Austin, on December 20th, Austin Lewis Sprout, age 16, a junior at Crestwell High School in Oregon, and a member of the school's basketball team, died at home from peritonitis after his appendix ruptured. Oh my God. That's horrible. He was sick for about a week and a half with what the family characterized as flu-like symptoms. This poor baby. His siblings told investigators that he appeared much better 3 days before his death, perhaps just after his appendix ruptured and the severe pain went away. Oh my God. For the last 2 days of his life, however, he could not walk or talk. Austin's mother, Bran Bellow, and stepfather, Russell Bellow, attend the General Assembly and Church of the Firstborn in Pleasant Hill, Oregon. Many Church of the Firstborn members came to Sprout's home to pray for the boy during his illness. The church believes in following the direction in James 5:14-15. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord, and the prayer of the faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. Austin's uncle Sean Sprout said the parents gave their son the option to seek medical care when he was sick. You see what they do, you guys? You see? That's a Scientology answer. It was his choice to trust in God, because it's the child's responsibility, right? And obviously, if he wanted to call the hospital, I can't stand these people. It was up to him, and we gave that option to him. No, as a parent, You had a responsibility. That's it. So it was his choice to trust in God, said Sean Sprout. Sprout said he believes Austin passed away because it was God's will. It's what we live for. Amy Hermanson, 7, died in 1986 in Sarasota, Florida. A talented little girl, she took piano, violin, and harp and art lessons and excelled in academic subjects also. Many teachers and employees at her mother's business observed Amy's weight loss and lethargy over a 4-week period, but did not report to Child Protection Services. They did not know she had diabetes. Some assumed the parents were providing medical treatment. Everybody's getting out of any responsibility here, aren't they? One employee said she did not report to CPS because she knew the Hermansons were Christian Scientists and they were signing her paycheck. No comment. A neighbor urged her mother to take her to a doctor, but the mother refused. A few minutes later, Amy crawled in from another room on her hands and knees and begged her mother to take her home. Her aunt said that she was incoherent and unable to focus her eyes the day before she died. The Hermansons were convicted of felony child abuse. You hear that, Scientologists? And third-degree murder. In 1992, however, the Florida... Oh, I can't wait. You guys know what's going to happen, right? The Florida Supreme Court overturned their conviction on fair notice grounds. See? Moloch. Citing a religious exemption in Florida's civil code, the court said, the statutes have created a trap that the legislature should address. Yes. And what was this, like 30 years ago or something? 21 years later, however, the Florida legislature still has not done so. It's even longer. I just had a thought, and I am not a genius when it comes to law and all these court cases and the various terms. But you guys ever notice how many of these verdicts that rule for, let's say, child sexual abuse, or maybe a child that was medically neglected or something like that, they get reversed or overturned? Robin. In 1986, Robin Twitchell, age 2, who lived near Boston, died of peritonitis in a twisted bowel. Oh my God. After a 5-day illness. Oh. It began with his screaming and vomiting. I'm just going to push through this because this is too much. By the second day, his parents, Ginger and David Twitchell, were calling the Christian Science Church's worldwide public relations manager. Because that's who you call, right? The PR manager. For advice. He assured them that the law granted them the right to use Christian Science treatment instead of medical treatment. On the 4th day, a church nurse recorded, child listless, at times rejecting all food. Moaning in pain, 3 wounds on thigh. The nurse force-fed him and directed his mother to feed him every half hour. On the 5th day, he was vomiting, a brown, foul-smelling substance. That's because he had a bowel obstruction. Autopsy photos showed bright red lips and chin, probably because the acid in the vomit had eaten the skin off. His privates and about 15 inches of his ruptured intestine were jet black because their blood supply had been cut off. He was so dehydrated that his skin stayed up when pinched. Neighbors closed their bedroom windows so they would not hear the boy's screams. If you guys need to turn it off, go ahead. At the Twitchell's trial, a Christian Science practitioner testified that she had achieved a complete healing of Robin and that he had run around happily chasing his kitty cat 15 minutes before he died. Rigor mortis had set in before the parents called 911. Imagine being the cops, or the paramedics, or whoever responded. Ginger and David Twitchell were convicted of manslaughter in 1990. In 1993, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, there we go, overturned the conviction on a technicality, but also ruled that parents had a legal duty to provide necessary medical care for their children, regardless of their religious beliefs. Later that year, the Massachusetts legislature repealed a religious exemption to a misdemeanor, in large part because of public outrage over Robin's painful death. Massachusetts today has no religious exemptions in the criminal code and no exemptions in the civil code dealing with medical care for sick children. The state does, however, have religious exemptions from immunizations, metabolic testing of newborns, and lead poison screening. Andrew Wantland, age 12, died of untreated diabetes in La Habra, California. In 1992, a Christian Science practitioner attempted to heal him with prayer for 4 days. He lost 30 pounds on the last day of his life. He was emaciated, vomiting, and urinating frequently. Later in the day, he was unable to eat, drink, make eye contact, speak, or move around. His mother, Gail Quigley, lived in Philadelphia and was not a Christian Scientist. She had joint custody of Andrew and had made it clear that she wanted medical care provided for her children. Nevertheless, neither Andrew's father, the Christian Science faith healer, nor other church officials informed Mrs. Quigley that her son was ill. No criminal charges were filed in the boy's death. Mrs. Quigley filed a civil wrongful death action against the Christian Science Church, the practitioner, Andrew's father, grandmother, and others. The district court, however, ruled that only the father could be held responsible, and an appellate court upheld the ruling in a split decision. Quigley then dropped the suit. See Quigley versus the First Church of Christ. Scientist et al., 76 Cal, Rep. 2nd, 792. Yeah, she was probably getting threatened. Imagine thinking that you're a Christian and that you're somehow above other people, and this is what you do for your children. Harrison. In 1998, 2-year-old Harrison Johnson, shown here with his friend Megan, was stung 432 times by wasps while the family was visiting church friends in Tampa, Florida. This sounds like negligence. His parents asked neighborhood children and fellow church members to pray for him, but did not call for medical help until more than 7 hours after the attack. 6 minutes after the 911 call, the EMTs arrived to find the toddler without a pulse and not breathing. His pupils were fixed and dilated. His parents admitted the boy had been unresponsive for 30 to 45 minutes. An Orlando pediatrician told the press that the toddler would likely have displayed alarming symptoms. He would have been crying and in great pain until he slipped into shock. His lungs would have been filled with fluid. His parents belonged to a group called the Fellowship, which reportedly shuns all medical care on grounds that doctors practice witchcraft. Little do those fools know. A former medical nurse, Carol Balazet of Tampa, attended Harrison's home delivery and was present with him for several hours after he was stung. She advised the parents that he did not need medical care. Somebody's trying to wiggle out of something, aren't they? Her book, Born in Zion, promotes Christian home births and argues that medical care is linked to pagan witchcraft. No, actually, that's Christianity, but I digress. The Johnsons were charged with felony child abuse. The judge, however, instructed the jury that the state must prove that the parents willfully, or or intentionally caused the harm to the child. The jury acquitted. And they've got links to the articles, the other articles. Nancy. At the age of 5, Nancy Brewster of El Paso, Texas, developed lumps on her neck and threw up repeatedly. She was too sick to go to school after first grade. A Christian Science practitioner prayed for Nancy. She urged the girl and her mother to deny the symptoms of the illness as an illusion. Nancy was constantly told that she was God's perfect child and nothing could be wrong with her. Nancy was made to exercise in 100-degree plus heat and forced to eat even though she was vomiting. Both her mother and the practitioner believed that Nancy was just being stubborn. Can you imagine this? Her mother sometimes even beat Nancy and blamed her for not getting healed. Nancy got no pain relief, even an aspirin. She was not held or comforted because that would be giving reality to the disease. Nancy died September 29, 1963, at age 7. Her death certificate lists probable malignant lymphoma as the cause. Wow. She had no obituary or funeral service. Her mother told her siblings to think that Nancy had just gone on a trip to Africa. In her family home, Nancy was never spoken of again. Like illness, death was considered unreal in Christian Science theology. By the way, I'm like a firm believer in, mind over matter and all that, because that's physics, that's law of attraction. I just want to add that. Her mother later became a Christian Science practitioner and published a testimony in January 1984, Christian Science Journal, with a disturbing omission. Rearing 4 children with total reliance on God for healing was a joy. I cannot remember an activity missed because of illness, she wrote. Wow. As Carolyn Fraser writes, however, in fact, Mrs. Brewster had 5 children. The unmentioned 5th child, who has been revised out of this testimony, indeed out of life itself, was Nancy Brewster. Fraser, God's Perfect Child, 428. Nancy's big sister published an obituary and held a memorial service for Nancy on the 40th anniversary of her death, and publishes an in memoriam every year to honor and remember Nancy. Dennis. On November 28, 2007, Dennis Lindbergh died at Children's Hospital in Seattle after he and his guardian refused transfusions on the basis of their Jehovah's Witness faith. Dennis was in 8th grade and had turned 14 in September. The photo at right was taken in 2003. During the boy's early years, his parents were addicted to methamphetamines and did not provide him stability. Dennis went to Mount Vernon, Washington, to live with his aunt, who became his legal guardian. On November 8th, Dennis was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia. Doctors at Children's recommended a 3-year program of chemotherapy and reportedly warned that many blood transfusions would also be necessary to prevent fatal side effects from the chemotherapy. Dennis and his aunt declared that as Jehovah's Witnesses, they could not accept transfusions, but wanted the best medical treatment available without blood. Chemotherapy treatments were given, but soon had to be stopped because the boy predictably developed severe anemia and an enlarged heart. On November 26, Dennis's grandmother contacted CHILD. We advised her to contact Child Protection Services. CPS immediately contacted the biological parents, flew them to Seattle, and arranged a court hearing for the next morning. Though CPS petitioned for custody and the parents told the court they wanted their son transfused, listen to this. The judge ruled that Dennis was a mature minor. Listen to that, you guys. who had made an independent choice to die. He knows very well by stating the position he's basically giving himself a death sentence, Skagit County Superior Court Judge John Meyer said. I don't believe Dennis's decision is a result of any coercion. You guys already know what this judge is, right? He is mature and understands the consequences of his decision. Meyer continued, this isn't something Dennis just came upon, and he believes with the transfusion he would be unclean and unworthy. By the time Meyer heard the case, Dennis was unconscious. The judge did not see him or speak with him. The boy was also unconscious by the time the court allowed his father to visit him. The Guardian and her daughters posted upbeat online reports on Dennis for several days. They said Jehovah is using Dennis in a mighty way. How's that for mind control? They said they were helping Children's Hospital learn how to treat leukemia without using blood. Wow. I'll bet anything, though, they eat meat that has blood in it. The Jehovah's Witnesses have hospital liaison committees to monitor hospitalizations of witnesses throughout the country and propose alternatives to blood transfusions. After the aunt suggested one to a doctor, the aunt wrote, Dr. Park was amazed that I kept coming up this stuff that she has never heard of, or even that she is one of the best doctors in her field. Thank you, Jehovah, for providing the HLC brothers. Among the alternatives the witnesses used were medication, guided imagery, massage, biofeedback, and naturopathy. Yesterday, his cousin reported we installed 6 red blood cells, red heart-shaped balloons in his room, hanging from his bed, for him to visualize healthy blood production to combat the leukemia. He's working on it, with the help of the angry garlic head Brian drew for him in his room. Their tone changed dramatically on November 22nd when they reported facing Satan's greatest test. To their non-Jehovah's Witnesses critics, they wrote, we compassionately understand your confusion and perhaps even your anger at the decision that Dennis and his family have made. Yeah, they went against the parents, too, which the judge was fine with that. We understand that this is an amazing, bright young man who has before him 70, maybe 80 years to contribute to this world. While we empathize with your strong feelings, we ask that you attempt to respect Dennis's fight for what he and his family believe so strongly in. We see this life, whether it be 14 years long or 84 years long, as temporary and relatively short, to the everlasting life that Jesus and his Father Jehovah promised true Christians who remain faithful. We appreciate your struggle because we have spent the past 2 weeks in endless conversations with very kind, earnest, dedicated professionals whose sole purpose in life is to save people's lives. However, these extremely intelligent people have come to know Dennis as many of you know him, and they have come to respect him and his faith even though it contradicts what they firmly believe. He has so very strongly stood for all of his beliefs with everyone he has known. Like, did he have a choice? Did he have a choice, you guys? And everywhere he has been on his short life. You see how they all put the responsibility on him, just like the other one did? This is what makes us all love him and admire him so much. He has always been a person of integrity, and he's all of 16. Never taking the easy road, but has been willing to endure whatever ridicule might come from living by his convictions. That kid didn't have a choice. While some may not understand the biblical principles regarding the sanctity of blood, the aunt continued, I would ask that you reflect on the fine moral character of this young man and trusts that his convictions on this aspect of Christian faith is no less important than any other conviction he has made known to all that know him. You have admired him and respected him for being such a person of integrity. Because she sure wasn't. Please realize that the same responsible, fine person you have known, child, by the way, is only maintaining his stronghold convictions, even in this most trying situation. Can we not respect this even if we don't understand it? He would want this. As was posted, I don't even like reading this. As was posted, his first comments after the doctors left his room on Tuesday were, "Now I really feel respected. He has made a decision based on his faith in Jesus, promised resurrection of faithful ones." Oh, where does that sound familiar? Who adhere to all of God's requirements, not just those that are convenient and easy to follow. Be interesting to see what the family history was. If any of them got any type of cancer or anything and then changed their minds. By November 22nd, chemotherapy had been discontinued because of the boy's severe anemia. Soon afterwards, the Journal on Dennis Lindbergh was removed from the webpage. For a discussion on legal and ethical issues raised by this case, see Child Newsletter 2007, Volume 4. Must have been hard for the doctors. And he suffered more than he needed to. Ariane. In 2012, Ariane Jade Grandin, 15, died at her home in Parma, Idaho, after suffering nausea and vomiting for 3 days. She became weak and lethargic and unable to eat or drink. She was unconscious for 4 or 5 hours and then suffered cardiac arrest. The pathologist found gastrointestinal hemorrhage and a ruptured esophagus. Oh my God. Wonder what happened. Her parents belonged to the Followers of Christ Church, which believes in prayer and ritual for healing disease and discourages medical care. Many family and friends were in her home when public officials arrived, but no one had called for medical help. Ariane had 5 brothers and 2 sisters. She was the 3rd oldest. In many ways, Ariane was a typical teenage girl. She loved snowboarding and running track. She was a bit obsessed with boys. She probably just liked boys. They gotta put her down. Was fond of both elegant dresses and torn jeans, and loved to take pictures with her girlfriends. A few months before her death, she had gotten a new dog. The last posting on her Facebook page was simply, "Can't wait for school." She was full of life. Zachary. On March 18, 2009, Zachary Sweezy of Carlton, Washington, died at home of a ruptured appendix a few months before his 18th birthday. That is so horrible. He and his family belonged to the Church of Firstborn, which has let scores of children die without medical care. I don't think they're the only one that has done that. His parents, Greg and Jale Sweezy, told investigators they first thought he had food poisoning and later perhaps the flu. This reminds me of the Scientology diagnoses. You know, everybody's like, the people who have the psychosis have Lyme's disease and all this crazy stuff. Over 3 days, he ran a fever and was vomiting with severe diarrhea. Aunts, uncles, and grandparents came to his bedside to pray. On March 17th, Mr. Sweezy called church elders who came to their home, prayed for Zachary, and anointed him with olive oil as the family waited outside in the hall. The next day, Zachary told his mother he loved her and asked for his father to come to his bedside. Oh, that's so sad. It is so unnecessary. His breathing slowed, his hands became cold and blue, and he died. Troy. On April 26, 2012, 4-year-old Troy D'Amelio died of Rocky Mountain spotted fever in the family's mobile home near Chandler, Oklahoma. His Church of the Firstborn parents told authorities he had been sick with a fever for about a week, but got him no medical care. Lincoln County District Attorney Richard Smothermom announced that no charges would be filed. You guys know what's going on. You just gotta look just a little bit underneath the surface. I can't talk about it, but it's not what you guys think it is. The law is clear that the parents legally can withhold medical care based on religious beliefs, the press reported him as saying. This kind of reminds me of all these diabolical elite trillionaires talking about the abortion all the time. Yeah. As with other Church of the Firstborn child deaths, the believers were convinced that Troy's death was God's plan and that the boy loved his religion, that the little baby never had a chance. The obituary said that Troy loved going to church with his mommy and daddy. Did he ever have a choice? No. Learning about the Lord, being around the brethren, and singing loudly. Shantae Walker, age 4, died of meningitis in Sacramento, California in 1984. Her mother was an adult convert to Christian Science and got her no medical treatment. Shantae was homesick from nursery school for 17 days, but the school staff did not report to Child Protection Services. Wonder how many of the school staff were the same religion. Her aunt observed that the little girl was comatose and threatened to call the police. Shantae's mother then moved her to a Christian Scientist's home where she died. Shantae weighed only 29 pounds at death. That's awful. Rhett. On December 21st, 2010, Colorado had another child fatality in the Church of the Firstborn. 3-year-old Rhett Ferguson died in Cortez, Colorado, of acute tonsillitis. Oh, this poor little baby. I did everything I could not to cry in this, and I'm okay now. I just got to push through it. Acute pneumonia and sepsis due to Staphylococcus aureus. Someone did call 911 at the last minute, but too late to save his life. His obituary states Rhett loved to attend. Look at this. The same crap they're putting in all the obituaries. It just makes me sick. Rhett loved to attend church. Did he ever have a choice to do anything else, like maybe go play in the grass or play baseball or something? And always brought a smile to your face and a kiss to your cheek. Okay, you guys, I'm going to put the link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Have an amazing day or night wherever you are.